Hi, my name is Steve Rahi. I am a Premier Field Engineer specializing in management technologies. Today's discussion will focus on SQL Always-On Availability Groups, specifically their support in ConfigMgr Current Branch. This is not intended to be a session that's exhaustive on SQL Always-On Availability Groups in general, but to just talk about it in relation to Config Manager, show how to set it up, and so forth. Here's our agenda. We're going to talk about what SQL Always-On Availability Groups actually are, the difference between SQL Always-On Availability Groups and clustering, some of the components there, and then how specifically we relate in a config manager world and set that up, and then we will go through a configuring demo. That's where we will spend most of our time in this session. So what is a SQL Always-On Availability Group? So this component was actually, or this capability was actually introduced in SQL Server 2012. Most of the time that I see this used or have seen this used has really been in a SQL 2014 environment, but it's in SQL 2012 as well. It's a component that is designed for high availability, right? So when we think of high availability, oftentimes we think of clustering. So it's really not. This is not really a new technology. It is built on top of the tried and true kinds of things that we've known about and worked with historically, the cluster type components and so forth. It's just uh, built more for efficiency. If you've ever set up a cluster scenario, a SQL cluster scenario using that technology, it's not insurmountable at all, but it's not the easiest thing in the world either. There's lots of nuances, and there are here too, but it is tending to be easier to set up. More granular control as well. So the ability to configure groups of databases that fail over together and so forth. And um, again, this is not a technology that is dependent on SQL Server failover clustering. It is dependent on Windows failover clustering, so there's a difference there. And the other difference is this particular approach for high availability is supported by Config Manager. There are other approaches that are perfectly fine for high availability, type scenarios, such as SAN level block replication, or database mirroring, or transactional replication, peer-to-peer replication, those kinds of things, transaction log shipping. Uh, those work great in a SQL environment when configured properly. They are not supported by Config Manager. This solution is, as of version 16.02. You'll see that again in a minute. So what about um, SQL Always On and clustering? Well, just said it. We definitely depend for this feature on Windows failover clustering. We do not depend on SQL failover clustering. So when it comes to comparing the difference between always on availability groups and failover cluster instances, or clustering, this table kind of tells the story. So the combination failover cluster instance versus always on availability group uses Windows Server failover cluster. Yes, both of them do. The protection level, this one's interesting. For clustering, it's an instance protection. For availability groups, it's a database level protection. So difference there. Storage types and so on. I won't read this to you. You can read the table for yourself, but this kind of gives you some of the ideas of the differences. So in terms of the SQL Always On components, just a few listed here. The URL at the bottom gives you a good article to talk about some of these. So definitely Windows failover clustering, you'll see that 2 or more SQL Server instances required to implement this, sufficient disk space storage to be able to handle the different components that need to be in play. We'll talk about that in a minute. Server 2012 or later, and then NICs and permissions have to be there, and so forth. And you'll see whenever we get to the config manager setup part that we do a lot of that for you to make it easier and so forth. So SQL Always On, availability groups, and config manager. The first thing that I just mentioned here, why is it that you would want high availability like this in a config manager infrastructure? What specifically does this provide you in terms of config manager? And when we talk about this, really we're talking about the SQL Server database itself, right? So in Config Manager, two primary components here: the site server itself, and then the SQL server that the site server requires. So when those instances, whether or not those instances are located on the same machine, whether they're on separate machines, doesn't really matter in this discussion. Just know that for SQL Server availability groups, we're only protecting that SQL Server database. So if something happens to the primary site server or the site server and causes it to go offline, hardware failure, whatever else, having the database is great, but without the site server, it's going to not be real effective. Having the database, though, would allow you to continue on and do operations that clients need to do, such as look up content across the management point and so forth. So all of that could continue normally in a failed scenario, right? So there are good, valid reasons to protect the config manager database. It does not guarantee complete high availability, because if that primary site server goes down, you're prevented from further administration until you restore it, right? So just know that's the focus. So again, this support for SQL Always On availability groups in Config Manager introduced in Current Branch version 1602. It is a configuration that is done in SQL, so there's really only one thing that you need to do in Config Manager itself, and that's done by a site reset to switch the database from the dedicated SQL server to the new virtual instance, as you get going. So a way to think about this, probably a pretty good comparison of note, probably falls down in some places I haven't thought of, is a virtual machine's relationship to physical hardware. Right? A virtual machine obviously is not a real machine. It's a machine that's implemented in software, in memory. The SQL Always On availability group is the same kind of thing. You will have two physical or more SQL servers that are going to be on physical hardware, or maybe even a VM, whatever. And then you're going to have, when you enable the Always On availability group, you're going to essentially create a new instance of SQL Server, give it a name that is now virtual, and that virtual name can sometimes be on physical host 1 or host 1 that's out there, host 2 that's out there, whatever. Right? Anyway, I'll show that to you as we go along. Hopefully, it will make sense. All right, so all of that precursor, now I want to spend the rest of our time together in demo. So a couple of things kind of as precursors, really one thing as a precursor, but as we get started here, just want to walk through it. In order to set this up, you do need to, at least for now, may be different as we go along, but at least for now, need to have a functional config manager site server already installed. So I'm going to pull in my lab just to show that I am indeed connected. So this is my config manager site server. It is installed. Hopefully, will come up without problems. All right. Configuration manager. Let's see if it launches the console okay. Give it a second. While that's coming up, I'm going to go pull in my my other server here, my domain controller. Okay, there's the DC. Okay, so I have that kind of waiting in the wings there. All right, so you can tell that I indeed have a functioning console because I did get a pop-up. And so I can go through here. There's a couple of different ways and look in the console to prove what my SQL server is right now. So I can go to site configuration, look at sites, go to properties on the site, and be able to confirm the name of the SQL server. And I'm on lab server SQL-1. That is one of my two instances of SQL that I have in the environment, right? Also, well, okay, just for completion, I can also go, if I didn't have the console available to me for whatever reason, I can go to the registry, and I can also look to validate where my SQL server is. Navigate down there to SMS. Okay, and then setup here. Oops, not setup, SQL Server. And I can tell again my SQL Server is here, right? That's the name. So I can validate it either way. Anyway, we know that we're connected, and I'll go ahead and minimize this and go ahead and minimize this. Now, another thing that I need to do this now because I've been working in my lab, and just to make sure my lab is ready, I need to go and make sure a few things are not in place. So let me go ahead and do it. And by way of doing it now, I'll show you what's going to happen as you roll forward. So as you configure your SQL servers for always on availability, a couple of things will happen. One, you're going to get some DNS records created for that always on availability group. And just want to make sure that I have mine purged. I do nothing here that is not what I want, so I'll go ahead and minimize that. And then the other thing is you will have a couple of instances added in here. So one of them is WinCluster. That's the name that I give to the Windows failover cluster. I'm going to remove that so that my wizard is able to go ahead and complete. And there's one other object at least that can be in here that's created as the failover cluster wizard and some of the other configurations you're going to see take place. So I'm good for now. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this out of the picture. Also pull out my ConfigMgr site server. And what I do want to pull into the environment now are my two SQL servers. So let me go grab that. Where's my other SQL server instance here? There. Okay, good enough. So let's pull that into the environment. Here is my SQL server, SQL-1, that is currently hosting the ConfigMgr database. I just want to pull that up to show you the state of it. All right, and there's SQL Server Management Studio. And I'm going to look here and connect, make sure I'm connected to -1, which I am. And then I'll roll down and be able to see my databases. Here's my ConfigMgr database. If I go to my other SQL server and pull it into the picture, log in similarly, SQL. All right. And just to show that here, when we log into -2, it is not hosting any database yet. It will be sharing the ConfigMgr database here in a bit, but nothing right now. Okay, so we're good here. Now, one of the things that I need to do is, in preparation for configuring always on, is I need to install failover clustering. So I'm just going to go through add roles and features, and failover clustering is a feature. So I'm just going to put a check mark in there, add the feature, click next, and then really I'm pretty much done. Well, I'm not done with this server. I have to do some other configurations, but I can do all of my failover cluster configuration now remotely from this server. So I'll go do the same thing here, add roles and features. Click next, 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 next. Failover clustering, add feature, next. All right, and install. And then we'll wait for this to come along and finish up. Shouldn't take very long at all. Okay, so the cluster config is finished. Let's go ahead and hit close. Now we need to go in and actually configure the cluster. Now for my environment, I'm using static IP addresses. Most of the server deployments I would imagine would be using static IP addresses. It would pick up and use a DHCP address if you wanted to give that, but in production environments it makes the most sense to use static. So in my failover cluster manager, I'm just going to go and create the cluster. There's also the option to validate if you want to do the validation task sometime later, whatever, right? Then you can do that. But I'm going to go ahead and create the cluster for now. Opens up a wizard. Just walk through the wizard. First thing I need to do is tell the wizard what the servers are that are going to participate in this cluster. So do this here. Add that one in. Okay, so now we have both nodes of the cluster. Click Next, and you have a choice of whether you want to run the validation tests on your cluster. A good idea to do that. You don't have to if you don't want to. If you know it's good, then that's fine. But I'm going to go ahead and run the validation tests. I'm going to go ahead and run all of them and click Next, and then off we go. So it takes me just a minute or so to probably run through all of these tests. You're going to notice most of them complete green. Some of them are going to end up saying in a red status, or such like the IP address information, some of the storage and all. And that's really because I'm in a VM environment that it's not configured the way it needs to be for this, but it's enough that I can show you how to set it up, right? In a production environment, you would want to have properly configured NICs and properly configured uh, witness disks and so forth. But for now, I'm just doing it this way. All right, so working through, and you can tell we're working on the network communication test, and then we'll be finished up. We'll have a nice report that we could pull about the things that we found and so forth if needed. But we'll just let this go ahead and finish up and move on past this step. All right, a couple more percentage points. All right, and with that, we should be finished very shortly. And there we are. Okay, so we get the wizard here that tells us, if we scroll up and down, what the results are, but we do get this note that it appears to be suitable for clustering, but there are some warnings and things that you might want to resolve in a production environment. Okay, so I'm going to click Finish. Now, the next thing I'm going to be asked is what the cluster name should be. So if we go back to the PowerPoint, here you'll see that I've kind of pre-configured what I'm going to call different pieces inside this configuration. So I'm going to go back and call this Win Cluster. It doesn't really matter. This particular name is not used by ConfigMgr. And then I'm going to give an IP address. Now, what I've done, you can do whatever makes sense to you, but I'm just kind of blocking my IP addresses together. So I'm using 125 for -1, 126 for -2. I will use 127 for this configuration. All right, and click Next. And so what this is going to do is now ask me what I want to do about storage. And I want to remove that check mark so that I'm not consuming all available storage just for the cluster. And then it's going to go through and do some work here to try to get things configured. This wizard can take a little bit, so I'm going to go ahead and pause the video and just come back once the wizard's complete. All right, and we're close to finishing up here. While we are, I'll just we are. So one interesting thing is sometimes, at least in my lab, I've had to run this wizard twice. The first time it fails. The second, I just clean out everything that was created. So back to that DC, clearing out the computer, the Win cluster name that was created, and making sure DNS wasn't populated. And then I run it again, and it works. I'm not sure exactly why, but that's what happened again this time. And we get some warnings about disk witnesses not being there and so forth, but we are successful. We have our cluster node created here. So we can then go in and see, the two nodes that are participating here. Both of them are up, both of them are okay. And don't need to go back to the other server. I will in a minute for configuring always on. At least for this, I don't need to, but we're here. All right, cluster events, we should be good to go here, no problems found, and so forth. So now that I have the cluster created, what I need to do is go in and enable and start to create always on, right? So since I'm here on my SQL server, I will go ahead and do it on this one. So enabling always on is done through the SQL Server Configuration Manager. So I'll launch that. SQL Server Service, come here, go to Properties, and then Always On Availability Group, or Always On High Availability. I can click Enable. This is the cluster name that I just created, and go ahead and hit OK. That tells me I have to restart the service. That's fine. I will go ahead and restart. So I need to do this to the other node as well. So we'll bring SQL 2 back in. Go ahead and close this up and get rid of this. Go to configuration here and enable the same thing. All right, always on, enable, good to go, and I will restart that service as well. So every node you would need to go and enable this on. Now I could do some work from SQL 2, but since my primary is going to be SQL 1, it has the database to host. I'll just do all of my always on configuration from there. So I'll pull SQL 2 back out. Oh, the only thing I'll show you here is failover clustering. So I'll go ahead and pull open the failover cluster wizard, and you will see that it is reporting as part of the cluster right here. So all good, right? So we're good to go. Okay, so now that I've got the SQL always on configured, what I need to make sure of, and I will just show you on SQL 1 for this so I don't have to switch back and forth. What I also need to make sure of is that my permissions are correct. So what permissions are needed, just go to computer management. Both nodes need to be administrators on each other, and also the ConfigMgr server needs to be an administrator on this machine. So go to groups, administrators. You see that I have the CM-2, that's my ConfigMgr server. It is an administrator here, and SQL-2, it's also an administrator. If I go to SQL-1, I'm sorry, SQL-2, then I would see the same thing except SQL-1 here, right? There's also a need to make sure that you have SQL security configured appropriately. So if you have this configuration where your ConfigMgr computer account is in the administrators group, then you should be okay to just go this way, right? Because security on SQL Server will factor in the ConfigMgr server here by default. It's in there. And so forth. So it should already be right, having the proper rights. You can validate the rights that it has by going in and looking through the different user mappings, securables, and status and different things, right? So DBO or rights to all this with DB owner and so forth. So we should be good to go here. Now, it's possible that you might have a separate installation account that you want to use for SQL. And if you do, then you need to make sure that account has appropriate rights. So let me just show you that real quick. So if I go back over to CM here and pull up the console, come on, pull up the console. So if I go down to servers and site system roles, one of the things I can do is just choose my site system, look at the properties, and then there's the option to specify a site system installation account. If you want to use an account, an actual user account, you can put that in. Just make sure that it has rights over on the SQL server. All right, so pull that back out. Okay, so now that we have that done, we need to go ahead and get ready to install SQL Always On. So one of the first things you need to do is stop the ConfigMgr site server, the services, so we're not trying to access and use the SQL server while we're doing this configuration. Now there's a couple of ways you could do it. You could just stop all the services. That's certainly workable. The documentation will talk to you about using the method I'm going to show you. So if you go to the program files, then Microsoft Config Manager, then bin, then x64, then 000409, oops, back one. Then you can use a utility called preinst and stop site. So that's going to go through and make sure all of the different components on this server, the threads of the executive, the site component manager, and the writer component and different things are stopped so that we aren't trying to do anything while this goes on. So we'll let this stop, and then I'll move on to the database and make some changes. Okay, so we have our component stopped. Now let's bring the site server back out and go back into SQL and make some changes. So specifically, one of the changes we need to make is on the ConfigMgr database itself. So if we go to Properties and look at Options, we will see the recovery model is set to Simple, which is fine for a ConfigMgr database on a standalone SQL server. For SQL Always On, we need to be in a full recovery mode. That's because as the one SQL server may have problems, the other server has to pick up the load. It needs to have a record of all the transactions that have happened and so forth. The full recovery model allows for that. It only clears the transaction logs at a full backup and so forth. So we can go ahead and make that change. Another thing that we need to do prior to starting to configure Always On is make a full backup of the database. Now, if you don't do that at this step, that's okay. You'll actually get to the always on configuration and you won't be able to go forward unless you do a full backup. So I'm going to go ahead and run my full backup. Actually, before I do that, let me go ahead and create a folder. So I'm going to call it SQL back. Oops. Good enough, and I will use that as my location to store. This is going to be on disk. I'm going to remove this and add the path, and I'm going to browse for it. And so should have SQL back right up here. Close that down, and we'll use this. And then the name will be cmdmo.back. Hit OK, and then OK, and off we go. The backup's working. Shouldn't take long. Very small database. And once we have that, we can move on. So 100% good to go. We can check the file folder just to make sure that we indeed have our backup, but we do. So SQL backup, there it is, no problem. All right, close that out. Now, with that in place, time to go configure SQL Always On. Oh, one more thing. One of the things we're going to need, might as well create it while I'm here. One of the things I'm going to need is a folder that is accessible by both SQL servers. And this is going to be the folder where I actually store my SQL Always On enabled config manager database. So one of the challenges of my environment, because I'm just on 2 VMs, is the share location is going to be on my C drive on SQL-1. That's obviously not a location that is going to always be accessible in the event of a failure. So you'd want to reposition it somewhere else. But for now, I'll just use this, and I'm going to go ahead and call that folder AG replica. Could be whatever. Going to do that. I'm going to share this folder. So go to Properties, share this folder. I'm going to go ahead and do Advanced Sharing. Share this folder as this name, the permissions, everyone here. I'm going to give full control, so that should be fine. All right. Okay, hang on, make sure I've got it. Okay, good. Okay, okay, and close. So now this is shared. It doesn't have any content in it yet. It will as we configure SQL Always On. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So to do that, I'm going to stay in my config manager or my SQL Server console and go create that availability group. Let me tighten this up under here. Here's my always on availability group. So I'll click on this. Oops. Hang on a minute. I need to refresh this. I did restart the service, but let me just go ahead and make sure that this is refreshed. Okay, always on availability groups. Okay, good. So that took care of it. All right, and I'm going to go right click and select new availability group and give it an availability group name. Now, again, this name is not what you're going to put into config manager, but I'm going to go ahead again and use the name CMAG. All right, and my wizard is now behind here. Hang on a minute. Let me go find the wizard. There it is. There's my wizard. Okay, CMAG. And click Next. And then there's a few configuration options. So here, this is my only database. If you had other databases on the server, you could choose those. It's my only one. This shows you that it meets the requirements. If I had not done that full backup, it would not meet requirements. I could not put a checkbox here, right? But I have, so I'll click Next. And then I get to configure. So you see that this is the node that I'm currently on. I need to add all of my replica nodes that will participate. So I'm going to go connect to SQL-2, which will bring it in as an available node. Primary right now is -1. That's where the database lives. This is secondary. And then other things I need to configure here. So first, I need to make sure that synchronous commit is enabled for all of my SQL replicas, and then readable secondary is set to yes for both. Okay, and then I'm done with that. So I can validate my endpoints on the endpoints tab, make sure this all looks like what I think it should, so forth. And then I need to configure a listener. Now this one is important. This is the one. This is the name. You're going to create a name here that is used by config manager. So just to pull down, it's going to be CMAG SQL. All right, now this window is a little bit odd. I don't know, probably my screen resolution or so forth, but I kept looking, where do I add a listener? Where do I add a listener? I can create an availability group listener. I can go and type the name, so CMAG SQL, okay? the port, which is just standard 1433 for me, and then static or DHCP. I prefer static, but I couldn't find anywhere to actually add the address until I maximize this. And there's a little bitty button right down here that you can click on to add an IP address. So continuing with my scheme, so I have 125 for SQL-1, 126 for SQL-2, 127 for the Windows failover witness. I'm going to call this one 92.168.0.128 and use that IP address. All right. And so if you click this, it's going to remove the IP, so be careful. I'm going to click next here, and I'm going to choose full, right? So maintain that selection. And here is where I need to go specify the network location that I want to store my replica in. So this is that share folder that I created, and I'm probably getting the name wrong if I don't look at it. So let's look at it again. So AG replica, that's the share name. Okay, so AG replica, and click next. And let it go through its task. Hopefully we get all successes, and we did. Click next and click finish, and it's going to go through and do the configuration. After we have this done, then we should have something created in that folder, AG replica, that can then be consumed by our peer node SQL-2. So pull that up. We'll just kind of watch while the wizard completes here. And at the end, we should have some successful data in here. Not pausing the video, should be just another minute. There we go. There's some that's coming in. So you can tell that's another backup of the ConfigMgr database, which is needed for this. And then one more thing that we're working on now. Yeah, so restoring to SQL2, and then here's our another file that we use. So we know it's there, right? So success all the way down. And so now we have our availability group created successfully. How do we know that it's created successfully? Well, we can go in and view our dashboard, and it's a nice view to show us. Here's our primary, here's our secondary. We haven't failed over yet. This is still probably working in the background, but we at least see all of this in place. And I could probably check again, just pull up the dashboard another time and see. Yeah, still working. So we'll keep going, and this should stabilize as we go forward. Now, another thing that we need to do as well is we need to create and prepare a few things on this availability group so that we are specifically, we need to adjust a couple of things. We need to set trustworthy computing. We need to enable common language runtime. So we're going to do that through a query. We'll have to do this to both nodes. All right, and I'll just, for sake of saving some typing, I'll just go ahead and paste this in. Pretty simple query. I just need to go ahead and run that. Doesn't really matter where I run it from. Let's see, did I get some typos in here? Oh, we'll just take it one at a time. So that worked, and then let's see if we can go on down and do this whole thing. Near go. Sometimes there's a little typo problem with the single quote, so we make sure that I'm good. And see if that will work. Nope, still not liking that. Let me fix the quick syntax there. I'll be right back. Okay, so I just retyped it. I must have had an error in there. You see it ran. I'll just run it again, execute that whole thing so it ran. So I'm going to go ahead and take this and copy it over to my other SQL Server, SQL Server-2, and run that as well. Oops, here that is. Pull that in. And let's do the same thing. New query. Paste that in, execute, and what did I do? Let's run it one at a time. It looks like it worked. Let's run this though. Okay, here, let's do this. This is what I meant to do, alter database. Well, that's odd. it looks like it's probably configured. So let's just go ahead and see what happens. So now we can go in. Let me take this out of the way and go back here and open up my availability group. We can right-click um, to the availability group here and select now to fail over. So let's show the dashboard one more time just to see what its status is. Okay, so now everything's fine. It just took a minute to set up. So now if I fail over, we should be good to go. So let's fail over, run through the wizard, and I'm going to need to specify what instance I want to fail over to, and I'm going to connect to that instance just with the wizard right there to log into it. Now click next, and it's going to go through the process of failing over. Now, obviously, I'm doing this to test. In a live situation, it wouldn't need to do this to do the failover. It would just take care of it, right? Okay, so it's failing over. It's valid now. If we go back and we look at our dashboard, which is kind of in a funky status right now because of the failover, close all this, and we go look at our dashboard. Hopefully by now, we'll see that it has failed over, and now -2 is primary. So it is. Now there's a little bit of data that's not filled in yet, but we know that -2 is primary. Now, another thing, you recall that I configured my listener of CMAG SQL. Now, just to show the virtual nature of this and how it's kind of the same thing, and this demo falls short a little bit, but whenever we connect to a SQL server, we think of connecting to our database engine, and maybe we think about connecting to an actual instance of SQL and so forth. Well, there's no reason that I can't connect to my now availability group, because it is an instance of SQL that happens to be hosting my one database. So you saw that I connected to it, no problem. I have my CM-_DMO. So I am configured. My availability group is ready to go. Everything is there, right? So now the only thing I need to do is go back and configure ConfigMgr. Okay. So how do we do that? The process there is pretty easy. We just need to uh, go do a site reset, and then we should be good. Now, one of the things you want to make sure of is that you have a healthy system before you go make this change. You don't want to take a ConfigMgr server that's in a failed state and try to move it to a SQL AlwaysOn availability group. So let me go to ConfigMgr, pull it in. So we left this in a state of not being started. And for this, that's fine, because we don't want it to be started. I mean, certainly the site reset, if we had these services running, it would actually stop the services first, make whatever changes, start the services. But in our case, the services couldn't have been running or shouldn't have been running, because then we wouldn't be able to make some of these changes with the database. So what I'm going to do is just back up a level, run setup, and that's going to launch ConfigMgr setup. Click next, and choose a site reset. And then I'm just going to move and modify the SQL Server configuration. All right, leave it all the same. The only thing I'm going to put in here is CMAG SQL. And to make sure that I have that right, I'm going to use the command prompt to ping, and I should get a response. I do. And so that should be good. I will just click next. It's going to go through the process of the site reset. Now, this can take a little bit, right? And I'll show you why that it's going to appear to hang. It's going to sit here and have no progress at all for I think 7 or 8 minutes at least, and then we'll see some things. Now, there's opportunities to clean up this experience a little bit as we roll forward. Hopefully that will get in there at some point, but it works. It works fine for now. There are a couple of places that you can run into a couple of odd things that I'll show you in just a minute, but let's give this some time to do its thing, and I'll come back. Okay, so this finally finished, and yeah, setup had a problem, right? And so let's go look. This is I'm sure the same problem I've seen. So we're going to go through, and the ConfigMgr setup log definitely sees what the various nodes are. So we're connecting over here, just rolling on down. Actually, this is probably not the beginning of the setup, is it? Here, let me go down here. Pull it all the way down. Okay, so let me start at the bottom and roll up here to when this began. Let me just find the top. Okay, so here's where the setup started just now, and command line going forward, and we're seeing the node. Here's -1, and then we'll see -2 a little bit down the way here. Okay, there's -2. So we detect we have SQL AlwaysOn nodes. We're connecting to them, no problem. And we have different things you can go through. And then what you see, which is really odd, and it threw me at first, is that we're failing because the cert chain is not valid, and there's another error that you can get in here about a uh, principal name and different things. And then we roll on past, and this is what takes a long, long time. And then finally, as we roll through all these connection problems, we get down to this line, and I just didn't notice this for a little bit, where we're trying to find a file, and we don't find the file, and so we fail. Right now, this is an issue that I know is not unique to me and should be resolved in a future build of this, from my understanding. But for now, how do you work around this? And so CMU staging, and it's this path. And so I thought, well, that's probably in the registry somewhere. So let me go find this line of text here and see what's going on. So I can go to the registry, and in the SMS directory, just do a find, put that line of text in, and lo and behold, I did find an external file directory. If I expand this, it is that CMU staging whatever, whatever. And if I go look in my environment, CMU staging, I don't have anything there. So that's what's causing the failure. So CMU staging right here is, well, I do have some things here, but I don't have that particular one that I need. And so what I did to get around this in the past, and it worked pretty well for me, is I just went in and changed the directory structure, just found one that had the file in it that we needed, and went with that. So I'm going to go with this and rerun the setup here in just a minute after I make this edit. So I want to make sure I do it correctly. All right, so let's go all the way back, paste that in, put a backslash, and so this time it should go through and be just fine. So same as before, I'm going to have to go and, for ease of finding it now, I'm just going to go delete that ConfigMgr setup log and let it recreate and then start this process again. So I'm going to close it, relaunch setup, oops, not the ping, relaunch setup, and go do my site reset again, modify SQL, so CMAG SQL, off we go. I did get that right? Yes, okay, CMAG SQL. And then the site reset should run. And this time it'll take the same amount of time because of those errors, but this time should work. So I'm just going to pause the video and come back when I'm done. And the reason this is hanging up, I just noticed, is that I left the -1, so it'll actually fail out in a minute. I will restart it again with just the CMAG SQL and let it do its thing. But I'll pause the video, do that in the background, and come back. Or I'll let you see that whenever I get the right name in there. Okay, so it did fail. So let me just change this to the right node. Don't have to start through it again, which is good. Click next, and then off we go. So now I will put the video on pause and come back whenever we've made it past that place. Okay, so I'm pulling this back out. You can see I've been running for 9 minutes and 20 seconds now, and you'll see some signs of life here in a minute. But if I click on View Log and go near the bottom, you see all these connection failures and things like we were seeing. But if I keep rolling down now, you're going to see that we actually are moving on. So connection failed. Now we're rolling through. We're trying to now install this, but we don't throw that path error now because we do have a valid path. You see that we're using it, and we're rolling through, and you can see we're starting the Bootstrap service on both Node 1 and Node 2 to do things like configuring certificates that we need and different things. So we'll let it go. Now you see some green process bar as we go forward, and we'll just let it go. We'll just check and make sure that it moved over and so forth whenever this gets done. But I will pause this again just for sake of time. And as we progress, dropping database notification monitor triggers. What does that mean? That's actually dropping some notification files into SMSDBmon, which will notify other components that it needs to wake up, that they need to wake up and do some work. So let me go to inboxes, actually logs here, and look at SMSDBmon. All right here. And if we scroll down to the bottom, we'll see that it's actually dropping some DMO files and so forth. Right, so right here on site control notification, so on. Right, so it's continuing. Okay, and then upgrading site control information, and we'll just let it go for a minute, and I'll come back. All right, and so that's pretty much it. We still have the green bar rolling across, and we'll just check in on the config manager setup log. We see that we're rolling through. Here's where we were adding our certificate and such up here somewhere. Yeah, so setting up everything, then running our certificate. Here's the certs coming back. We're stopping our services. We're rolling through. We're adjusting all the permissions on the database that are needed. So I'll just scroll on past all that. All right, then continuing to configure, verifying we have shared access, and then very soon here we'll be done. And that's it. So we are complete. So I'll close this, and then we can go and open up. All the services should be started as a part of running the site reset. So I'll just go ahead and launch the Configuration Manager console. See if it will connect for us. Hopefully it will. Go ahead and close this out. Yeah, we connected. And then just like before, I'll go into administration, look at sites, and we can verify in properties that we're talking now to the always on availability group, and in fact we are. So that's really it. That's how we go through configuring the SQL always on availability group. You saw some of the challenges that might appear to be in the logs, and the pathing issue that I ran into that I worked around. Right, and so that's really it. Not a lot of configuration in Config Manager itself. It's really mostly on the SQL side. So we will end this session here, and we will see you next time.